Hi, everyone. That's a cross between everybody and everyone. Okay.
You
Hi,
got it.
everyone.
Every-
This is the Cross, also known as Denise Cross, also DM Cross of Crossworks. And I'm going to be interviewing somebody I met recently and have just fallen in love with. This is F. Steele. F. Steele is a writer, yes. And I wanted to, first of all, I want to ask you one thing. Where does the name F come from?
That is a very long story. Well, I'll give you the short version. My youngest brother was born. My mother became very ill, and she wasn't able to take care of him. And so for his first 3 or 4 years, I was his mommy, and he couldn't say my real name, which is Ethel Jean. And so it got shortened to Ethel, and then we got shortened further to F. And it has been F since I was 14 years old.
Wow. So I'd like to ask you now, when did you start writing? How long have you been writing? And do you remember the first thing that you ever wrote?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, I've told the story many times that I was in the library in my town, very small little corner, but it was on my street. And back in those days, as we like to say, back in the day, some 70 years ago, the parents would kick you out of the house and you came back when you heard your name called. And it was so Ethel Jean, then I had to stay in sound range. But I discovered the library and I was an early reader. So this was heaven to me. There were books and books and books and books. So while I was reading all of those books, when I would go home, I would start writing my own books. It started with comic strips. Um, I had a comic strip that was influenced by Tom Swift Jr. books. Those were, oh, I was in love with Tom Swift. And so after reading all of the comics in my newspaper, would go upstairs in my room and write my own comic strip with Trick Spacey. And he was a super scientist genius like Tom Swift Jr. And he had a dolphin shaped submarine and he had a jet car that went to the moon. And then, yeah, unfortunately, when I went away to college, my mother threw away all of the things of childhood, and that includes that. Um, when I began writing fiction, it was mostly science fiction, and except the one novel that I finished um, was called Spy Kids. It was about the kids of international spies who discover their parents are spies, and unfortunately, the boy and the girl in the story, their parents were on two different sides of the uh, international espionage system, and it was called Spy Kids. And that was, believe me, I'm old. I'm that old that no, it had nothing to do with the movie that came out many years later. But but I did have a seventh grade reading teacher who had a reputation for being lazy, and I didn't know it at the time, but I found out much later. So he spent the entire last week of class in seventh grade reading my novel to the class. So that was my first publication.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
very, it's very interesting.
I do still have that. It was written in pen on any piece of paper I could find. Mostly the stockings card. Well, you and I know what that means. Not many people today know what that means, but the cardboard stock that came inside a stockings wrapper. So
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. That's a great writing board. If that's what you use, that's
Yeah,
what you
you
use.
use
What
whatever you
about
could get.
television shows? What
Oh
kind
my
of TV
gosh,
shows influenced you?
I loved the Twilight Zone and Outer Limits, and what was the Fireball XL5 on Saturday
Oh,
morning? Yeah.
yes.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't much into the other one that they did, Thundercats or something, but Fireball XL5,
Thunderbirds.
I can still sing the theme song, you know. Um, and then The Man from Uncle and Wild Wild West. Um, And then what ended up happening was my adventures through the library had brought me around to the sci-fi section. And from then on, I began writing science fiction. And then I discovered Tolkien when I was in 10th grade. And I began writing fantasy. And Dark Shadows.
Oh my goodness. You're hitting
Yes.
all of them.
In
The only
fact,
one I'm asking and interested in, what about Star Trek?
oh, yes, definitely. I mean, I my first my first attempt at a novel was about an alien woman who comes to Earth and discovers that she's part human. She was exiled there because of that, and that ends up. It's funny because that ends up becoming a theme in some of my other works. But oh yeah, Star Trek,
Was
absolutely Star Trek.
was there any particular episode that you were fond of?
Um, in the original series, I think my favorite one, because everybody goes to Tribbles, which is a work of art. It really is. And the DS9 Trials and Tribulations was just so perfect. But you can't disregard City on the Edge of Forever.
My
I mean,
favorite.
Harlan Ellison, I know that he rails against it, but they managed to adapt it in a way that worked so well. And it really brought forward a lot of themes that I end up using, much, much later, like, the moral choices, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few and all of that.
Yeah. It's
Oh,
interesting
yeah.
because that's my favorite also. And I did see when they did the 25th year anniversary of Star Trek on and rebroadcast them, Ellison was interviewed and he pretty much said, I hated the ending. It was the ending he was. And I said, if somebody had to rewrite the ending that he would have given, I'm glad they did because it would not have worked.
No,
He basically wanted Spock to come and solve the dilemma, of and it's like there no, the captain has to be the one to make the decision. If he had
exactly.
with Spock, it
Exactly.
would have been a mess. And you said you were interested also in the Wild Wild West, so it makes me wonder, did that anyway lead you into steampunk specifically? Because that was one of
No,
the precursors
but
of steampunk.
it's precursor, but the term steampunk didn't even come about until much later.
Hmm.
Um, at the time it was just science fiction. No, the more influential TV show, I guess I would say, is Briscoe County. Briscoe County was definitely steampunk punk because it brought in outer space aliens and the orb and all of the newest thing coming, and the professor with his rocket attached to the train. Um, and in fact, the twins that I write about were influenced by the Schwenke sisters. If you recall, did you know Briscoe County?
I know Briscoe County. I watched some of it. I did not watch all of it.
The
Oh.
professor teamed up with these two German, I think they were supposed to be German, maybe Swedish, um, sisters, and they worked the forge. They were steam, what do you call them, blacksmiths.
Mhm.
They had muscles out to here, and they were. And so seeing these two beautiful women slinging sledgehammers was just, oh yeah, I like that. Who are these girls? And they stayed with me right through until the twins showed up in my head. For that series.
So tell me about Esprit de Corpse, which is the book that I have read and I absolutely love. How did you come up with the idea of actually it has a lot of different genres. How did you put those genres together and make it come out so well?
Well, that's the punk in steampunk. You go back to the original steampunker, it was Jeter, and his infernal devices. It was a perfectly Holmesian book until these fish people showed up. It's so I majored in 19th century literature. Well, I majored in French, and most of our reading was 19th century literature. And I just loved that whole time period. There were great authors. The author, Georges Sand, would not get out of bed until she had written 1,000 words. Now, there's a, there is a discipline for you. Um, and so I kind of wanted to go back, not to the Holmes late 19th century. I wanted to go back to the beginning because the 1840s were so steeped in science in the 1800s. And Great Britain was trying to, they couldn't find the money because they were broke. After the Napoleonic Wars, they were just flat broke. So they would squash any effort in science, whereas France was like, do what you want. And so many great discoveries. I mean, the Paris-Orléans Railway was monumental in that it was in a nationalized railway system. And that began the concept of an international network of rail. So it was a fascinating time, and the more uh, I wanted my twins, and I kind of wanted them at first to be, as I said, both of them be engineers, and maybe one would come up with the ideas and the other one would sling the sledgehammer. But then the more I did research on the 1800s, the more they had spiritism, they had the arts were like huge. Chopin and Liszt were not yet the superstars that they became, but they were working on it. And I could see Angelique being in that environment. And so that became the characters. And then I thought, well, why is she so wild? What is it that makes her so profoundly different? And that's where the punk comes in. It was completely punked. And so the supernatural comes in. So, we've got the international intrigue of Russia and the Janissaries who were slaughtered. And it's just a wonderful time to mash up all of those different avenues. Yeah.
It mashes up so well. I cannot do anything but recommend this book. And I also like the use of language, not only the you're throwing in French, you're throwing in references to Arabic, I believe that
Mm-hmm.
is,
Yeah.
references to Russia, and but also the way that you use the words are definitely from the period. It's something I appreciate because in a lot of things that I read that's contemporary, they use contemporary language.
Right.
And what I was reading in your book was the language of the period. And
Mm-hmm.
how did you manage to put that in there? How did you make that? Or why did you
I
make that something important?
it was very important because France, this is my gripe about the United States. Our people are not bilingual or multilingual in any way. And you go anywhere in Europe and they speak 3 or 4 languages to some degree. They have to. There's a quote from Chopin, from the biography of Chopin had this quote in it, and he said that there were more Poles, Austrians, and Hungarians in Paris than there were in Poland, Austria, and Hungary. And in fact, I use that quotation in book 2. So the best way to bring those flavors in is to bring the language.
Can you share with us some of your writing routine? What kind of things do you do? You talked about the woman who put together, who was that? Who put together 1,000 words before she even got out of bed?
Georges Sand, she was a famous author
Oh,
of the
George Sand.
Georges
Okay.
Sand. Yeah,
Okay.
George Sand.
Yeah, George, that
George,
person.
that George.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, it's not so much a routine. The process, I guess, is because Now I'm going to sidetrack, although I got to tell you a funny story. It happened at a con recently, and I was on a panel with my mentor, Greg Frost, and two other male authors. And they asked the question, what's the most important, you know, thing about writing? And my mentor kicks it off by saying, you've got to set a writing routine. You have to tell yourself you're going to get up at whatever time and you're going to write for an hour or 2 hours. You have to stick with that schedule. And all of the men on the panel said the same thing. Oh, yeah, it's very important to have discipline. And I just looked down the line at them and I said, well, that is utter baloney. Because it's, how many women can turn to their husband and say, well, you have to leave me alone for the next 2 hours. I don't want to cook dinner. I don't want to clean the house. I am not taking care of the kids. You walk the dog. I'm going to go write. Oh, yeah, right. That's going to happen. Um, and they talk about writing in a vacuum. I said, well, you got to write while vacuuming. It's it, I never found a discipline because of that. Um, I have a process though, and the process is, as I said, I get these images that I want to play with. I'd be watching a TV show and say, well, if I were writing it this, Harlan Ellison's ending. But then I start doing the research, and I I research until I find like an intersection. Um, and when Jack and I did a visit to France in 2008, we stayed at the chateau that was just the perfect chateau. You'll see a picture of it on my website. And I knew that this is where that my girls would live. Um, we went to a second chateau, and that was the one that had the forge nearby. I said, okay, and it's got the hill and it's got the forest and the vineyards. I said, this has to go in the book. And then I began to do the research to find what year, what day will this book begin. And I found this wonderful quotation from Delacroix, the artist, that said that the Paris Orléans train was a blessing to his rheumatic bones. That's it. That's that kicked off the train. That's what made it so popular. Um, and that is the scene. The funny thing is I was stymied completely because I went back to France to do interviews and research they have 3 or 4 railway museums, and I was going to do my research there. And we landed in Paris on March 14th, 2020.
Hmm.
And on March 15th, Macron told everybody to get out of the country. They were shutting down. So I never did get that, which is why the train is only in the beginning. But I gave her own railway, thanks to
Yes.
Wild Wild West.
Yay.
So we get to play with that a little bit. But then I had to go so many other places to find a setting that I could use. So that's where the catacombs came up. So
Wow.
um, it only when I got all of the research in my head, I sat down, started to make bullet points, what I wanted to include. And then as I'm making the list, it began to take shape. And I sat down and wrote the whole thing out inside of 6 weeks. And I had so much research in my head on it that I wrote the second book in 4 weeks. So it just came pouring out. And then there's a third and fourth that are done now.
Wow. Yeah, and actually that was going to be my next question, if you have any works in progress. So you pretty much have done a third and a fourth already,
Yeah,
but
and
what
and
else
I'm
are you working on?
working on book 5. But I was going to be doing that's set in Wales, and the setting that I'm using is a castle that actually was part of my family history, the Jenkins family history. And I was going to go to Wales to do, get your setting, your feeling, your local shots, your local color. Um, But I was just informed that I'm going to have spine surgery. So I don't know if I'm going to get to Wales this year. I don't know if I'm
Mhm.
going to be walking the rest of this year, but we'll figure that out.
Mm.
I'm also translating my Esprit de Corpse into French to see if I can pick up a French market for the series. And and I've got a couple of smaller pieces in the works that'll be coming out in April at the Steampunk Festival.
All
So
right.
you'll be there.
All right. Yeah, the plan is
Okay,
already in
good.
motion. And for
Excellent.
those of you who might be interested, we are talking about the Telltale Steampunk Festival, which is going to be about the third week of April. I think it's the 20th and the 21st. And
Hmm.
this is last year is where I met you, was where we met.
Yeah,
I want to show the, if I can, because sometimes these things just don't work like I want them to. Let's see if that'll work. And
sharing the screen.
sharing, sharing, not that one, not that one. There we are. And
Oh, that's my website. Yes, it
yeah,
is.
that is fdeal.net. And this is where we can find out all about you.
And that's the
All kinds.
chateau I was talking about.
Oh, it looks beautiful. All
Hmm.
the awards that you've won for Esprit de Corpse. Now, folks, you may have thought that maybe she misspoke when she said Esprit de Corpse. When you get the book, you'll understand. So go out and get the book. It's not a typo. Okay. But you'll find out even more. Oh, here's the festival, April the 20th to the 21st of this year. Get your tickets for that, and you can meet both of us if you so desire.
Yeah,
So,
and a Cry of Hounds comes out there, and I have a little teaser for it on
ooh,
the right there. If you scroll down,
where
you'll
is it?
see
Scroll down
right there, A
right
Cry of
here.
Hounds.
Oh,
No,
oh, yes, the Cry of Hounds.
look at
Okay.
this. I'm pointing to my screen so that
So I can see it, and so we can see you. Yes,
yeah,
and
A Cry of Hounds. Well, of course, they're looking for stories of dogs or wolves or hounds of any kind. And I just happen to have this wolf I know. So
yes, without saying too
yes,
much
and this
more
is in
about
her
that.
wild and woolly days of her wanton profligate life of Angelique and Jacqueline trying to rescue her. But
Yeah.
it was fun,
Well,
and it's again, that's where research comes in. It is Arthur Conan Doyle's grandfather is the main character.
oh my goodness. Okay. Well, it's something for us to definitely get excited about. I hope my viewers will go and get the book Esprit de Corpse so that they can get the basis of all of these other wonderful stories. It's well told, and I know that you'll enjoy it if you decide that you're going to purchase it or read it somehow. That's why,
It
and then leave a review. That's
it's
very
a romp. It is absolutely a romp.
it's a wild ride, and I think that's the way I described it. It's a ride that I'm glad I went on. Thank you so much for spending time with us. I really enjoyed it,
Oh,
and
thank you.
wish you the best, and look forward to seeing you in April.
Oh yeah. You
Okay.
take care.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.